In 2 Samuel chapter 11, we read about David's encounter with Bathsheba. We learn that David stayed at his palace while his men were out fighting battles. He looked down from his roof and saw Bathsheba bathing. He asked about her and was told that she was the wife of Uriah the Hittite. David had her brought to the palace and they had sex. Later on, Bathsheba sent word to David that she was pregnant. David called Bathsheba's husband Uriah back from the front lines and told him to go spend time with his wife, but Uriah refused. David got him drunk and sent him home, but Uriah slept in the street instead. When David saw he could not cover his tracks, he sent Uriah back to the front lines with a letter telling Joab to make sure that Uriah was killed in battle. Bathsheba mourned for her husband for a period of time, and then David took her into his home and she became his wife. Bathsheba gave birth to a son. Later, Nathan the prophet confronts David. Nathan goes to David and tells him a story about a rich man and a poor man. The rich man had many sheep, but the poor man only had one that he loved like a daughter. But when the rich man had a guest, he didn't feed his guest one of his own sheep, but cooked up the poor man's little lamb for dinner. David is enraged by the rich man in the story and vows to have the man severely punished. But Nathan says to him, "You are the man." David repents, but he is now living under the curse of the covenant. David's child with Bathsheba died. Later, David and Bathsheba had another son named Solomon, one of the ancestors of Jesus. Solomon was also known as Jedidiah, the name God gave to him. Jedidiah means loved by the Lord. Throughout history, Bathsheba has been portrayed in many different ways. Most of these ways appear to shed a rather negative light on the character of Bathsheba in one way or another. Art and cinema have portrayed her as both a harlot and a rape victim, objectifying her to the extreme. She has been labeled as one of the bad girls of the Bible. While some might argue that this title suits her actions, others point out that titles and portrayals such as these further objectify this woman and bring about an even greater injustice. The latter would perhaps say that objectification of a woman such as Bathsheba throughout the history of art and cinema is the result of male oppression in these systems and in society as a whole. Bathsheba is often portrayed as a lewd whore leading David astray. In Henry Keene's 1951 movie David and Bathsheba, she is portrayed as one who despised her husband for his lack of love and conspired to entice David. You might call the Bathsheba of this movie David's stalker, or a wicked temptress. She has been portrayed a little better in other films. Even in children's films, which are careful not to portray excessive amounts of promiscuity, she is still often seen as an object. Even VeggieTales' King George and the Ducky, seeking to avoid adult subjects, portrays David as an anthropomorphic cucumber and Bathsheba as a rubber duck, an object. While media has tended to portray Bathsheba in rather negative terms, Bathsheba can be viewed on many numbers of levels. Bathsheba should not be viewed in a negative light, but ought to be seen as one who is prepared or sanctified by her action of washing, and ready to be used by God as the mother of a great leader of Israel. Her sanctification and identification with the Israelite deity is evident even in the midst of the sexual abuse suffered upon her by David. The literary school of feminism recognizes both the negative and the positive views of Bathsheba. Feminism seeks in a way to liberate the female from her bondage to male-dominated thought in literature, society, work, the home, and other places. Literarily, feminism may be applied to the Bathsheba narratives in the Bible, bringing about a number of different views and interpretations of both the figure of Bathsheba herself, as well as critiques on the male characters in the narratives, such as David, and suggestions about the writer or writers of the narratives themselves. A feminist interpretation of the text may be approached in a number of different ways. You can interpret the stories to portray Bathsheba as a helpless victim of David, pointing to this as an example of the oppression of women throughout history by men, in order to say that women must at last be liberated from male domination. You can portray Bathsheba as a very clever woman who positioned herself in just the right place at the right time in order to gain political influence, and you can interpret in the hope of showing that while Bathsheba was a helpless victim at first, she overcame these difficulties and rose to become the most prominent woman in all of Israel, eventually causing her own son to be placed on the throne.